evening. I'm very happy to be here. I'm now around like 3 or 4 days and I have a very constructive and pleasant time. And every occasion I have the opportunity to talk about what I'm doing. I'm grateful to do so, and I'm happy to explain some ideas or to bring up some thoughts. And maybe it's a little story, kind of an anecdote, but not an unimportant one, as it has been changing my life completely. And it's something which always triggers me to know why someone is doing what he's doing. And if people would ask me why I'm doing what I'm doing, this has to do with this very specific situation when I was a child. So I make a jump from when I was 8 years old to what I'm doing now. And I was living in a town between Antwerp and Ghent. It's like just in the middle of half of 40 kilometers, 20 kilometers from Antwerp. And I had the habit, my parents were not like traveling people. So the farthest trip we made together was to Antwerp in my life with them. And so we had the habit to go in the summertime every time to the zoo. And this, as a child, is of course a very nice ritual to see the animals and so on and so on. You saw some birds before has nothing to do with this. And one day we were going to the zoo, and unfortunately the zoo was closed. And as a child you have a big disappointment, of course, as you're like looking forward to see the animals again and so on and so on. But my father said, listen, no problem, I have a splendid alternative, let's go to the Museum of Fine Arts. And so fairly disappointed, I went to the Museum of Fine Arts with my father, and which is a very big building, like kind of, like a church, as you can imagine, like a 19th century building. With the staircase is bigger than I was, and everything was in a certain decorum. Everything was split up according to periods. You had from the 14th century, the 15th, the 16th, the 19th century, and so on and so on. And I was impressed by the paintings of Rubens and Van Eyck, and I saw like paintings of people with distorted hands, like expressionist paintings, and so on and so on. And at a certain moment of time, I see a very little painting of Jan van Eyck of 1432 or something, with a little Maria holding the child Jesus in a kind of closed garden, like a hortus conclusus. And the painting was not bigger than my hand today, but I had to stand on my tips in order to see this little painting. And I was wondering then, at that moment, why do people, being 8 years old, in the meantime I think differently about it, but at that moment I was wondering, why do people, for such a little thing, build such a gigantic building? There should be a reason. There should be, apparently this has one or another importance. If not, they would not construct this building. So after visiting the museum, I went out with my father, and I told my father, listen, this is what I want to do with my life when I will be grown up. And my father, who was has another spirit, let's say, he was saying, yes, of course, my son, good luck. We will talk later to each other. But I didn't know what was a museum, what can I do in a museum, what is art, whatever, and so on and so on. And I started to draw and to paint in a rather obsessive manner, which was, of course, not a very pleasant and inspiring situation for my parents, that they would imagine that I would become an artist. And so at a certain moment of time, I came back from school and they decided to take everything away in my room. And I was saying to myself, listen, it's a pity that I don't have nothing to paint or to do anymore. But if I cannot become an artist myself, then I have to become someone who can help artists, who can work in a museum. And this is what I'm doing today in a certain way. And you know, I tell this story because this is like a kind of something on which I think almost every day, about this very caring and almost epiphanic experience I had with this very little painting, and how this little painting had a possibility, and not in my case not a possibility, but how this little painting did change really my life. So this is in all the work we have been doing, and where I've been working before. This has always kind of been a kind of attention or a focus or an interest or an obsession to look for the connection between, let's say, art, later on the museum, and, let's say, urban life or society or like contexts which are not looking as an art context. And I'm formed as a sociologist and as an art historian. So, and these two things merge, but I will never see the approaches we have towards the museum or towards art having a kind of, as a kind of a sociological project or a sociological stand or position. For me, it's always the art which comes at first, or which is a starting point, and which generates certain ideas or certain projects on which I will be talking later. So later on, in '86, and that's a project, again, which connects to today, I made kind of a pilgrimage to the city of Ghent, to the museum which I'm running today, to S.M.A.K. At that time, it had another name, as the museum was not existing. And there happened in the city of Ghent an exhibition entitled Chambre d'Amis, like guest rooms, if you translate it. And it was like the idea that the museum was, that the artists and the museum was leaving the museum, and that 50 houses of inhabitants of the city of Ghent were being used as the sites, as the locations where artists would intervene. But with this condition that people were still living in these houses. So you could see an artwork of Mario Merz and visit the Mario Merz or Bruce Nauman or Cornelis or other ones. But while the people were like playing around with their children or cooking or reading and so on and so on. So you had like a kind of very strange mixture between like an interest in art, but at the same time a kind of voyeurist perspective on how people are living, what people are doing, and so on and so on. I was visiting this exhibition as a youngster, and this made a terrible, and I mean terrible in a positive sense, but also mind-blowing in a way, a terrible impression on me. First of all, I was convinced that the condition of an artwork should be the one as I saw it when I was 8 years old, namely within the context of the Holy Temple. And secondly, I was not thinking that other kinds, again, I'm back in the past, that other kinds of materials and ways of working and dealing, and that the performance or a certain gesture or an act could have a kind of artistic meaning or an artistic impact. So this was again like a second eye-opener, and an eye-opener which was again like a constructive moment in terms of what's happening today and tomorrow in the museum. So these two stories as a kind of fundament of things I tell you, which you will think about later on when I come back to other elements and other things. But I heard already before the talk was starting, and I have the tendency to speak a lot. So stop me if I should stop. But I heard before that there is an interest, a specific interest, in the project we realized in the hospital in Ghent. It's a specific story again, and it has to do, for me, it's a tribute on this Chambre d'Amis exhibition. And it has also to do with this treasuring of an artwork as a kind of amulet, as something beyond anything functional in the first sense. And it goes like this: at a certain moment of time, one of the hospitals in Ghent came to see us in the museum with a very specific question. They had, within the hospital, they had an organization by themselves dealing with certain like artistic workshops and like kind of therapy forms and so on and so on, especially applied on the department of cancers, on the oncological department. But instead of going in the traditional sense of having these workshops and like clay making workshops and drawing workshops and so on, they wanted like to have once another proposition, like a proposition by saying, listen, we are a hospital dealing with innovation, dealing every day with new developments in curing people and so on. Why should we not try that also within the other aspects, which is not our core business, but why should we not try to have also their kind of a project which has another nature, which could be more innovative, which could have another dialogue between the patient and what he could be doing in terms of an artistic activity, and so on. So they came to see us, and of course at first I was not very, I was interested, but I was a bit surprised by the fact that they were asking this, and for sure, as it was for the oncological department. I had some cases in my family myself, so I knew I could speak from with a certain empathy. And I saw it, and maybe this was is like a typical reaction of mine to see it in a negative atmosphere or a negative stance. And so we asked some time to think and to reflect on what we could be doing. And then at a certain moment of time, we were making an analysis by saying, as a generalization of course, that the trajectory of the patient is, among others, characterized by two things. First of all, the fact that he is like commuting between the cancer patient then. First of all, that he is commuting between the hospital and his private home, between the clinical, very rigid context of the hospital, where he gets news, good news or bad news, but news which has also to do with a certain medical approach, with a certain way of telling things and so on and so on. And at the same time, going back to his private atmosphere, to his house, to his homey context, to the things, to a place where he defined everything, or she defined everything himself, how things look like and so on, and how one could talk about something. And secondly, the fact that the disease is not only affecting the person itself, the patient itself, but also affects his peer group, so his family, his friends, and the people who are living around him. So we were thinking if we could develop a project where we could address these two characteristics, these two elements as a kind of main heart or the center of the project, then we could maybe develop something which is meaningful. Because I believe that if someone is doing something, if one is organizing a project or an exhibition, or for sure in other and different contexts, that one always should question himself whether there is a necessity to do it or not. I think the world is already full enough of many things, good things and bad things and strange things and ugly things and so many things, that one has to, and that one for sure with a kind of a project that one has to reflect very well what to do and what not to do. So at a certain moment of time, we had a gathering with the people of the hospital, but not, and this is also an important element to me, not only with the doctors or not only with the director or the board of the hospital, but with everyone who is involved in the process of in the process of the curing or the process of the oncological patient. So as well the cleaning person, as the onco coaches, that was something which they developed there, as the nurses, as the logistic persons, and so on and so on. So everyone who deals with this process should be part of the discussion, should engage and himself in the project and be responsible and to take it for granted. So what was the idea? You see like a place, a room. It was a room in the hospital, so it's an old building as you see. And the room was available, and we were thinking that it would be nice to develop a kind of a box, and you see it in the next image. How can you stop this? Like this. Yeah. So you see kind of a box, a bit blurry, but... And the box contains about 35 artworks. Each artwork, all the artworks together form a kind of a landscape of materials. So there are sound pieces, there is a video piece, you see like a kind of very traditional sculpture. You have more, like the thing to the right is an object with the last breath of the artist's father. You have a newspaper, you have a stone of a Japanese artist, you have dices of a Cuban artist, you have drawings, little painting, collages, and so on and so on. Even instructions to do a performance. So you have you cover like all the kind of aspects of visual arts, also ranging from a certain conceptual attitude towards something which is recognizable, which is something which is more within the stereotypical idea how people think about art. Because it was also my idea, we had a discussion with the hospital, and I make now a jump, but I come back, that I say, okay, we will do an art project, and we will only do the project with the people who are by themselves already interested in art. Say, no, if you think so, if you think like this, I'm not your partner. If we do it, we have to do it for everyone, without any distinction in ethnicity, in education within age, and so on and so on. Everyone should have the opportunity to take part in it, but it's the responsibility of the hospital to activate it. So what is the principle actually? So you see the box behind on the other picture. You see like a wall of boxes. In total, there are 70 of these boxes. And these boxes are made out of plexiglass. And if you look from above, but it's all the things I say is like a kind of meaning we don't tell it, because it's like it's a model of the museum in a way. But it's also like a model of a kind of the box where you carry your pills in. And these boxes can be, are in the hospital in a passive way, but it's the doctors and the nurses and all the other ones are there to activate the boxes. So which means that at a certain moment of time when there is a consultation with the patient, or when a nurse is like taking care of the patient and they have a certain discussion, then this box can be given, and the person or the patient can take the box home or to his room, preferably home, which means that at this moment, about 45 of these boxes are somewhere. I don't know why. I even don't want to know. I don't know where. I even don't want to know where. Are somewhere in the private houses of the inhabitants of the city of Ghent. And the nice thing is that in the idea of this thing, there is no obligation. There is nothing which is kind of an imperative stance. You can take the box home and you cannot feel well and put the box in the corner and you can keep it for a week, or you can keep it for a month, or you can keep it for 3 months, or you can keep it for a year. And from my point of view, you can keep it when you're cured, for instance. You say, really, it meant something to me. You can keep it all of your life, or you can steal it. It doesn't matter. The hospital thinks differently about it, but in my case, it has to do with the fact that it should disappear in the city and anonymously disappear in the city, and that the objects are not being defined as an artwork. Of course, for me, they are artworks, but that inside, the only thing you have is a kind of folder, and on the folder is with each object. There are some sentences explaining why it's exactly this object which is in the box, but not with the names of the artists, because some of the artists are famous, and we didn't want to know them who made what. It was not about this. It was about the potential meeting or the potential fact that an artwork could be a tool on which certain meanings, certain sentiments, certain emotions, certain ideas could be projected on. The thing is, because it started 3 years ago, so the room is there. The room is the office of the onco-coaches, so they actively use it. The idea is also over time to change the objects, so now and then to bring other artworks in it and to get others out. So all the boxes are the same. You know, it's like boîte à multiples. It's like also an homage to Marcel Duchamp with his boîte en valise, where he made like all his boxes with all the ready-mades, like the small ready-mades. So there are many layers coming together. It's like a kind of like a neural system, whereby this thing goes from one place to another, and by transmitting it from one place to another, it suddenly gets a total kind of other character, another meaning, and another significance. The hospital people themselves, like the doctors, want to know what is the effect of the box on the patient, so they want to have like a kind of enquête. They want to have a list with questions to know how did you use it, how often did you use it, and so on and so on. They are free to do it. For me, it's not necessary. Again, it's not about this. It's about something like which has the potentiality to come together and to connect. And this brings me to another thing which we are going to do in the near future, and which is an extension of this idea, but in another context, whereby this deals with the urban context of the city of Ghent, because most patients are like living not further than 20 kilometers out of town. One of the plans that we have in the near future, and I cannot show any images, but you have to imagine it, but which is, as I said, a continuation, is a project entitled In the Pocket. And it's a bit a cynical title, of course, but literally it has to do with the pocket. And it is a bit also a response on the fact that an artwork could be a kind of amulet, could get some meaning which is different of the meaning that an artist gave to it. And you know that nowadays we face, I will speak for Belgium, I don't know how it is in Ireland, but let's say in most countries in Europe we face problems with immigration and with illegal immigration and with political how do you call this, political people coming for refuge in the country and so on and so on. And what is my observation is that mostly they are treated really bad by the government. I will not make any political discussion about the pros and the cons and so on and so on, but every human being is a human being. But I see they have to sleep in the streets in Brussels and they don't get any way to be hosted and so on and so on. And a big percentage is after some months of insecurity and of some months of like total despair with families and so on and so on, they are put back on the airplane. But one has to imagine this, you know, imagine you come from Angola or from Iraq or from Mozambique or whatever, and you try to start a new life, and suddenly, boom, 2 weeks later or 2 months later, you're again where you came from. It sounds like this game, where when you're on the wrong thing, you have to start anew, but unfortunately, it's not a game. And I would like to, together with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, to start up something together with artists, namely that when they have to return to their home country, so when they are leaving Belgium, they get kind of they get a bag with some, I think, some water and some sandwiches or something in order to go through the trip along. And I would like that I would like to invite 10 to 15 artists to make a site-specific work. Like these works are also in a way site-specific, but site-specific for the context of this hospital and for this box and so on and so on. But they make a site-specific work for the pocket of the people, of the illegal refugees, because the pocket is something. It's a space. We have 2 of them on top of this. Most people have them. Unless that you're wearing a shirt, of course, but it's like a very intimate space whereby you cover your hands, or you hide your hands, and your hands are also like an indicator of a certain a feeling or a certain how you feel or of a certain nervosity and so on and so on. And imagine that an artist makes an object which you can use and you can hold in your hand or give a meaning, and that from Brussels airport this disappears in like 20 or 30 or 40 countries. I think this would be fantastic. Yeah, it's not happening yet, but and also imagine that one artist is making something out of bronze. You arrive in your country and you say, okay, I don't know what to do with this thing, but I can make money out of it because it's bronze and I can get 30 euro for it. Okay, it's fine. But someone else might say, no, I care so much about it that I will treasure it all my life and I will take it around and so on and so on. So again, the same idea of the fact that an artwork can transform or will arrive in a totally complete perspective or a completely different context, and will at the same time still be in the eye of the one who developed it, a kind of artwork. And at the same time, of course, as this one in the hospital and the other one, for sure the other one more, is a very explicit comment on our society, on how we treat people, on globalization, on all the illusions we are living, and so on and so on, and is at the same time not easy to get done. Because this thing now, we had some, like 2 years ago, it was a difficult moment with the hospital project, not so much from us, from the museum side, who are also like talking about it and informing on it and so on and so on, but of the hospital, who suddenly sees, doesn't want to invest too much time in it and want to go back to their core business. So you see that the moment that something is developed within arts, within other contexts of society, being it a palace of justice or a hospital or other realms, that mostly people like the exotic part of it, and the curiosity of it, like Yeah, the exotic part of it, whereby they don't want to take it for granted 100% or not for a long period of time. And that's the thing that is, I think, important, because it deals with a certain responsibility, a responsibility that you give to the doctor, that you give to the nurse, that you give to the people who have to activate this thing. And this brings me to another completely different thing, which has to do again with contexts and shifts of contexts and the way how cities are dealing with practices of art in public space. It's something which fascinates me, but whereby I have also, again, some fundamental remarks. Sometimes I think an empty square is more beautiful than an empty square, than a square within a sculpture. So sometimes public space does not need to be activated by art, but which doesn't mean that one should not try to make the connection between public space and the context of a city and art or an artist. And before, I've been living for a while in Hamburg, and there is a place in Hamburg which is called Veddel, and these were buildings like social housing built in the 30s, but nowadays it's like a social disaster, really catastrophic. In terms of mobility, there is nothing, there is no social mobility of nothing. And the thing is that it's surrounded by the train, by the river, and by the S-Bahn. So everything has to do with mobility and moving. Only this part didn't move itself. So I was thinking that it was a fantastic place to do something, to develop a project. And by the end, we did it in Ghent, whereby two important things come to the front. First of all, most artists are being asked to do something, and this thing should be ready within 6 months. So you get an offer today, and then 2 months later you have to do the proposal, and 4 months later the thing has to be inaugurated. And sometimes this logic is correct, but it is of course nice to try to develop a project or to make a context or a condition whereby you extend the time frame of the project to the time frame of daily life, which means that the project we developed was not happening for 1 year, was not happening for 2 years, but in my mind, and we're facing a difficult moment now, I have to admit it, but in my mind it should last 20 to 25 years, as a kind of perpetuum mobile, as something which is going on without any protocol, without any formal apparatus, without any, just something which is going on, and whereby as a person or an institution you could of course facilitate things which should happen, but you're not instrumentalizing the things which are happening there. So what was happening, so that's the first thing. And secondly, another thing is that mostly things are defined, or cities, that's the mind of the city. And again, the museum in Ghent, S.M.A.K, is a municipal museum, so we are financed by the city, but which doesn't mean you cannot be critical towards the city. The second thought was that mostly projects are defined in terms of success. You know, everything is successful, every exhibition is successful, every realization is successful, but the idea of failure, the idea of the fact that something is not working out, that something is not successful, that something is a complete catastrophe, this is something we don't like to focus on. You know, this is happening every day. In my life it's happening, in your life, in the city it's happening, in society it's happening. You go through the newspaper and it's full of failure. Failure is like a kind of part of the human condition. It's also part of the artistic parcours. But it's not being cherished, or it's not being taken into account. So within this project, and instead of going from the idea of, okay, haha, by the end we will have something very successful, we were saying, no, let's see what happens. Let's take failure as our main guide in order to go to the end. And so what happened is that I invited some artists in 2 places, Moscow and Bernadette, and not Moscow in Russia, but Moscow in Ghent. It's a neighborhood called like this, and Bernadette after the Holy Bernadette, also in Ghent. And it was an artist, a Dutch artist, Bart Lodewijks, whom I invited to visit this place. But I was not saying to him, do this or do that. We were just having coffee, just talking a bit and about things, not necessarily about art, not about this project, but I invited him for Moscow Bernadette, but I left it open. It was not that he got a list of 4 pages with indications and requirements and something to contract and so on and so on. No, just showing the place. And the guy started working around using 3 tools, namely chalk, which we all know from school, a little ladder and a level. And he started making, without permission, but with our support, but not with an official permission, he started making drawings. That's one example, but he started making drawings, like I call it a kind of, and he doesn't like it when I say it, but nevertheless, he's not here. I call it a kind of geometric graffiti. So he makes these drawings with lines, with chalk. It's a very intensive process, so he's there with the ladder doing the drawings. And the drawings connect to the environment, have kind of a, relate to the architecture, to the perspective, go over different buildings and so on and so on. So at the moment he made more than 50 of these drawings within this neighborhood. And at the same time the drawing, although when you see his artistic language, it doesn't look very communicative. In the meantime, I call him like the mayor of Moscow. He knows everyone, because every drawing, every line he traces is kind of an invitation for meeting and discussion. And this, therefore, I go back. So that's the outside of the house, and that's the inside. And it's a guy living there of 95 years old, whose framework is, of course, not contemporary art. The nice thing is, to the left, it's very blurry, but here it's a little bit more clear, but I can hand you the computer afterwards. It's fantastic. It's a picture of the king and the queen, but the king and the queen of the 30s. So they passed away already 40 or 50 years ago, but it's still hanging there with a little photo of his daughter in it and so on and so on. The Angelus van Millet is there, but he allowed Bart to make the drawings in his house. And so to have, again, this dialectic between what's happening in outside and inside, and we made like kind of on their request, not from us, but we make like guided tours to see all the drawings, and the drawings which are still left there because they are taken by the rain. They are chalk, so it is. He rings the door and he says, "Can I make a drawing?" And the first thing he says, it will disappear, but it disappears only 5 years later or something. But again, it's like this kind of, the idea of having this very little, gentle gesture, but with a certain gigantic implication, according to me, on certain mindsets, on certain thoughts, on how a city or an urban context or the extramuros or the extra surroundings could connect to visual arts. So you see in a way that's a bit an obsession. And for me, what is important there also is that often things are being, and it's also a phenomenon of our society, and it's another thing I've been talking about to Seamus yesterday, another dream of mine, but I will not tell it now. We can do it in the atrium later on. So it's often many things in our society are being characterized to the evenemential or toward the, there are two methods to become, to get a position that's the evenemential and the catastrophe. These are the two ways how things are being weighted or how being discussed. When we are doing a good exhibition in the museum, we will not have a review in the press. But if I have some financial problems, or if there is some water inside of the museum because the building has a problem, then the next day it's immediately covered. So it's good to know how you can get attention, but it's a bit a sad situation, of course, that nowadays things are being looked at in that way. So the idea of the spectacular, the evenemential, and the catastrophe are like the main roads to define things. And you see it everywhere, in every domain, in every, not only in the arts, I think. You see it also in in music, in all kind of parts of society. And for me, that's, as an institution, S.M.A.K, we are like a rather big museum, but nevertheless, I think it's important that you still that you're not only doing like the big rhetorical gestures, but that you also can just move a finger, you know, that you can be active in a very microcosmic scale or a microcosmic fragment of something, and at the same time also engage into something which has a broader and a bigger range. Look, that's another example. How he's like working and working and working. Based on this project, he was invited to do it in the favelas in Rio de Janeiro, but he's not only doing it, it's not only about like social context, it's about other elements. Huh? And this is something I will talk about later. This is something else. And then I finish this part of the public IDs and the public tracks, literally, because you see, I apologize for the blurriness, but you see all these things are like posters of events, but there is like one very simple, ordinary one with the titles track, or the least flashy one. That's fascinating. Wacht, hè. And next year, in 2012, we organize in the museum an exhibition taking part in public space, and whereby I didn't talk about all of them, but the ones I've been discussing are for me like molecules, or like parts, and are form like a fundament for the thing which is happening in public space next year. And again, I think the things I've been discussing talk about a kind of a form of engagement, or like a kind of a fight or an answer or fight against indifference. And for the exhibition next year, we decided to start, which I'm co-curating with Mirjam Varadinis from Switzerland. We decided to write in an almost old-fashioned way a manifest. And as a tribute to the futurists, as a tribute to the Dadaists, as a tribute to, you know, every political avant-gardist movement who took a stance in society, as a tribute to the student revolts, as a tribute to, you know, art and the manifest of the anthropophagia and so on and so on. So we decided to write a manifest, and the 3 first sentences, which you cannot read, but I will do, say, what does it say again? I know them, but not, that a city has no borders, art has no borders, and this exhibition has no borders. And of course, this is it's a paradox and a contradiction, because a city can only exist by having borders, of course, and the same is true for art, and the same is true for the nature of an exhibition, and the nature for a meeting with a person, or the nature of seeing an artwork. It is by borders and by kind of zones or a limit or a kind of code that things are being defined, but that things are also being transformed. And this is something which interests me, that with this exhibition, starting with this manifesto, which is, by the way, also translated in 11 languages, and we did it not to be fancy, because we are living in a multicultural society, but also as a comment on how language functions and what language means. I mean, we have it translated in Turkish and in Japanese and in Hindi and so on and so on. At that moment, this thing becomes only like a kind of image for me then, but for other ones it gets another meaning. And also, of course, the vehicle or the instrument of the manifest gets also a completely different connotation within other cultural contexts. But by writing the manifest and by having this title track, we want to answer the idea of this evenemential, the idea of the spectacular, by facing the city and its complexity and its richness. And the city of Ghent is kind of a medieval town, which has grown in concentric circles in a way. So you have the medieval center, and then you have like the 19th century wing of industrialization and decay, and so on and so on. And you have two stations in the city, and in a way you can connect them from the north to the south, and by going from the one place to the other, you're confronted with all the different layers, all the different realities of the city of Ghent. And in a way, for me, this kind of, it's like a biosphere. So what we will do with the exhibition with about 35 artists from all corners of the world, this will be not about the city of Ghent, although it will specifically interact with the city, but will be about a kind of condition, a kind of human condition, how it is happening nowadays. And I bring you back now to another idea, and this will be the last thing, because I don't know how long I'm already busy. And I want to bother you too much. Huh? Okay. Brings me to another thing, which is one of my personal obsessions. And I didn't talk so much about the museum itself, but which I think is nice and okay, because I'm not here to, as a salesman, to make promotion for the museum, but to give some ideas on which we can discuss later on. But this brings me back to another project I've been doing, which talks again on a certain term of, or a certain idea of responsibility. And this was a collaboration between the Academy of Münster in Germany, the HISC, which is the higher institute, it's like a residence place in Ghent, and some universities in Santiago de Chile, which is really at the edge of the world. And you have a place in Santiago which is entitled Matucana 100, so Matucana 100. The name of the center is the address of the place where it is, and it's a big warehouse. And this was during the dictatorship of Pinochet, the place where the resistance was hiding, and where, like, from there out, the resistance was being organized against the regime of Pinochet. And since 10 years, it became like a center for arts and dance and so on and so on. And I was invited to do, I did 2 exhibitions there. One was entitled Circuitos, but I will not talk about this one. But the other one was entitled El Manifiesto de Santiago, so the Santiago Manifest. Again, I'm there again with the idea of the manifest. But it deals also with the idea of curatorship in a way, and I put things completely upside down by saying that I didn't want to choose the artist. So I left it, I gave the opportunity to the Academy of Münster to choose which artist of them would be there. The ones of the other institute could also choose them, and the ones of the University of Chile could also choose. So I would not be there as like the godfather to say, you yes, you not, you yes, you not, or yes, yes, not, or whatever. So there was at a certain moment of time a group of 30 people, 30 artists who didn't know each other. We were spending there together 10 days with the intention, with the naive intention, of course, and it was on purpose naive, to write in these 10 days a manifest. And what we had, it's a bit comparable, so it's a beautiful space, and the only thing which I was also saying to the artist, you're not being invited to make an artwork, you're invited to talk, to discuss, and to, after 10 days, that we print a manifest and that we are happy. And what happened, I built a stage like this one, and the 2 doors from which you entered, you were immediately on the stage. So you could not go into the rest of the exhibition space, but you were on the stage. And on the stage were tables, and we started to discuss with the artists, and gradually, every day, or every 2 or 3 hours, some artists started working and doing something, and they came to ask me the permission, can I do something there? And I decided for myself to say always yes. And I never said no, which as a consequence, of course. So it was, the first artist asked, can I do hang my paintings there? I said, yes, of course you can. Another one said, I would like to make an installation and I need a video projector. Do you think it's possible? I said, yes, of course it's possible. But they were not used to this, you know. They were used, there is an expectation that there should be kind of a confrontation, not something which is kind of, you could not go along too much, like in judo or something, but you should say, no, it's not possible. I will prefer that you hang your work there, or we should do it like this, and so on and so on. And gradually, during these 10 days, suddenly there was an exhibition and no manifest. Only there was one artist from South Africa who was so militant and so stubborn to write a manifest, that he was like finishing the last day on the wall, one sentence of the manifest which failed. And why do I tell this again? Because I believe that that in a way, what in this thing was happening, as in all the other projects I've been defining, that it's also, there is also, say me if I'm wrong, but I think that there is kind of a mentality whereby we try to get rid of certain hierarchies, to get rid of certain modes and certain habits and certain courtesies, behaviors, forms of politeness, which are so common and which are so present within the art world in the first place, but also within society. And that by putting these things upside down, that you generate something else, you generate another form of meaning, another form of knowledge, I think, and also you keep on being critical towards the things you see, but also towards the things you do. Voila. I could go on for an hour, but it's 7 o'clock. I hope I give you some hummus. Yeah. Thanks a lot. Yeah.